Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unito's webinar. So this is basically a product overview webinar. And today we will cover an overview of Unito, including an introduction to who we are and what we do. Then Leila will take us through a demo of how to connect Unito and illustrating Unito's functionality. We'll go through some of our pricing, and then there'll be an opportunity at the end for you to ask the questions that you have. So we're your hosts for today. So hi, everybody. I'm Sarah, I'm an account executive here on Unito's end. And we have Leila as well, who's a customer success manager on our side. So to give you a little bit of an introduction, so tool overflow can leave organizations feeling disjointed and siloed. And we know that oftentimes different tools are specialized for different things. So different teams need these different tools, right? So you're left with tools like email and Slack to kind of bridge that gap between them. And the consequences of having these disjointed tools are real. So teams often aren't aligned, visibility into work is lost, collaboration stagnates, and there's kind of a bit of lost time trying to piece everything together. And so what Unito does is it allows you to break down these tool barriers and gain visibility into work that's happening, align teams, and save tons of time and effort. So you don't have to go into Slack to ask someone about the work that's happening in Asana. You can see that directly in Jira, for example, right? And some fun some interesting things to note about Unito is we're hosted in AWS data centers in the US, and we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, GDPR compliant, CCPA compliant, and we have multiple pages on our website dedicated to help you understand how we handle your data. With Unito, work just flows. You can see here some of the customers that we serve. We have over 50,000 customers in over 5,000 companies. And here are just some of our G2 and Kepler reviews. So that's a little bit in terms of how Unito, who we are. We'll jump into how it works.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. We have a small group today, so don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. We'll be able to review them following this little demonstration. Sarah, can you confirm if you're able to see my screen as well on the Airtable base? Okay, perfect. So for today's demonstration, we're going to show you how to build a two-way flow integration between Airtable and Google Sheet. So I'm sharing my screen currently on a base for this demo in particular. So I've started a little template here for a client list of customers that will be onboarded eventually with myself. So dummy information here. Before we get started and jump in right into the flow builder, we're going to start by seeing a little bit of the prerequisite work that is necessary before creating the flow. But let's take a step back and look at what are the objectives for building a flow between these two powerful tools. So Airtable and Google Sheet are both great tools for managing data and projects. And in many cases, specialized teams within an organization end up using Airtable due to the limit of seats available, or to ensure data accuracy is only controlled by a handful of members. And other team members within the same organization are going to end up relying on export or copy pasting to have access to the information on free sheet tools such as Google Sheets. As a result, the teams are going to find themselves in data silos without accurate information or updates. This is where Unito comes to play. So we're going to show you how to populate Google Sheet with the live Airtable data with a two-way integration. Before we start building our flow, we have to ensure that within our Airtable base, we have a field called last modified. Very easy to add this field by clicking here on add field, and then in the drop-down menu, you should see a last modified time default field that is pre-built in Airtable. By adding this field, it's going to allow me to create the connection to Airtable's API. The second step is to start building our destination tab or sheet in our sheet tool here, Google Sheets. So I've started, a little Google Sheet template right here, and I've also started by inputting the fields names as rows headers in my Google Sheet document. So in my example, I want to sync the client name, the onboarding due date, the client email, etc. This is going to be the destination of all the information that is currently lives in Airtable, and this information will be updated live by Unito. In order to allow Unito to access to this sheet, I'm going to get started by adding an extension. So you can look for the extension in Google's Marketplace by clicking on add-on and get add-ons. Because I already use Google Sheets and Unito add-on frequently, I already have it here as a quick access. So I'm going to get started and add my Unito add-on. So a pop-up is going to appear on my screen, letting me know of the steps, the prerequisite steps in order to create a flow on Unito. So use the first row of your header and freeze it if you want. This is not mandatory, but you need to have some fields with title names. And then the second step, similar to what we did on Airtable, we're going to need some extra columns. The first one being the Unito ID at the beginning of the sheet, and the last one named last modified at the end. Unito also enables you to, click on a button in order to have the rows inputted by themselves. Then once these two rows are added, so here Unito ID before all of my fields as well as last modified, I'm going to be able to start building my flow. So I'm going to head to my Unito app, which is accessible on app.unito.io, and then create my first flow. The flow creation consists of 5 different steps. So the first one being connecting your tools. For Airtable specifically, if it's the first time that you're connecting Airtable on Unito, it's going to invite you to enter an API key that is easily accessible on your account settings in Airtable. I'm going to go ahead and choose my Airtable account as well as the table that I'm looking to sync. So here I'm going to have a view of the bases that I have on my Airtable account, and I'm going to select the one that is of interest. I'll do the same thing on the Google Sheet side. So I'll select a Google Sheet account with my, account name, and then I'll have to select the sheet that is of interest. If you haven't created a sheet yet, you'll have the opportunity to do so from here, or search by name, or directly input the URL. Very often we end up with, tens or almost hundreds of sheets after a couple of months of work. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste my sheet link directly in this field. Here it is. Okay, perfect. The Unito add-on is going to confirm that it has been, correctly configured, and I'm going to be able to confirm my setup. So this first step is really important, ensuring that you're selecting the right table in Airtable as well as the destination of the information. In order to, simplify today's presentation, I already have a flow that is created that we can jump right through after this step, but I really wanted to, walk you through the detailed configuration of Unito. The second step is going to be the flow direction. So in today's presentation, we want to, populate information in Google Sheet from Airtable. But if your scenario is different from mine, you could also choose the direction to be different. So it could be a bidirectional sync. So any rows that are created on Google Sheet will create new rows on my grid view in Airtable, or a new card in my Kanban view, etc. So I'm going to select a one-way for today. The third step is really important as well. So this one consists in looking at the rules that were created, the rules and trigger by which the rows in Airtable needs to adhere. Okay, my Unito app is refreshing. It won't take long. Okay, I'm just going to reconfirm this step. So in the third step, we're going to determine which records and rows we want to sync from Airtable. So in the example that I showed you earlier, I have a grid with the names of my clients that are going to be onboarding. And then I could decide that I want to populate Google Sheet based on the status and only if the status of my onboarding is planned. So if it's delayed or is in execution, I don't necessarily want to have that information populated in Airtable. So I can determine these rules and triggers by selecting the field right here. So the choice is right here. So I'll jump in and select status and only select a certain value. So only if my onboarding is planned or is in the monitoring complete phase, for example. You'll notice here that we also have a creation date rule that is added by Unito by default. And this is a safeguard to allow you to sync only new data or data that was recently updated in Airtable if you want to avoid impacting any historical information. And then on the other way, so from Google Sheet to Airtable, I could also select triggers. But in today's example, I'm only populating data from Airtable. And then the final step is to ensure that we're selecting which data flows between both tools. You could have hundreds of different fields in Airtable, but sometimes we don't necessarily want to provide visibility in all of the information that lives in Airtable. So we can very customize the information that we're going to select. So by choosing which fields we want to sync. Let's say budget is sensitive information that I don't want to live in Google Sheet because anyone could access it or anyone with an active link. I'll only select other fields here by clicking on them and then mapping them to the same row in Google Sheets. So kickoff date is going to be kickoff date, etc. Not budget. So the creation of a flow is, really fast. It requires some attention in the rules that we're going to use, as well as the fields that we're going to map. During the onboarding phase, you also have access to a couple resources accessible on our website, such as walkthroughs. You'll have step-by-step videos as well. And you also can, reach out to our support team by clicking here on the little chat bubble. Our support team is available by chat on this, on our dashboard, or directly by email on support@unito.io. So there it is. I've, completed all the steps for my flow, and I am now able to launch it. In order to look at, the changes in Airtable, I'm going to go ahead and, sync a new row right here, and I'm going to use Sarah as an example. So Sarah, we have a meeting that is planned, and I'll add a couple, other information such as the kickoff date and the onboarding dates. So by adding a new row, as well as inputting my status to planning, which adheres to the rules that I've selected on my Unito dashboard, this will trigger an automated sync to populate the information on Google Sheets. On your Unito dashboard, you can follow the progress of a sync by looking at the most activity, recent activity stream, and also checking on the status of your flow. You also have the ability to turn on or turn off autosync. So turning on autosync allows Unito to trigger updates anytime a new activity has been triggered. Removing autosync would prevent Unito from doing so unless you manually click on sync now. So I see that an update has been made a couple seconds ago. So an activity type create has been completed, and we have the updated item with the link to the item right here. So I'll go ahead and open my document, and here it is. So we have the Unito ID with Sarah's name that I've inputted, the kickoff date, as well as the status set to planning. When I chose the fields that I wanted to map, I left them all in a two-way sync. That means that by editing or updating the information on the Google Sheets side, the information will automatically be reflected on the Airtable side. So if I move it to, execution, for example, I can also trigger a new update, and I'll be able to notice the new sync happening on my activity stream on the Unito side. I hope this has been, straightforward. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. Or as mentioned before, if you have specific, questions about your scenario, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So in summary, with Unito, you can skip manual steps between Airtable and Google Sheets with live data flowing between them constantly. You can reduce the cost associated with Airtable seats that are not always necessary, and you can create more robust data reports. So often from customers, what we hear is that Airtable reporting might be limited, and what Sheets tools allow us to do is have more robust reports and analysis than on Airtable. And finally, you can have a backup at all times in case you're no longer using Airtable. For Airtable users, other use cases that are really popular to sync or to leverage Unito for are Airtable to Trello, Asana, Jira, Monday, or ClickUp.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leila. I'll continue with the presentation. I also dropped some links in the chat in case, so to highlight what Leila was saying, so you can find the link to reach out to support, some of the links that we spoke about, and security resources as well. Perfect. So I'm going to go on to the next piece of the presentation. So these are some of the common use cases that we see with Unito apart from the Airtable Sheets use case that Leila just showed us. Some, for example, is project management reporting use cases. So you can have different project management tools all funneling into a Google Sheet and using that for reporting. We also see support ticket escalation use cases very often, where you have a tool like Zendesk or Intercom that takes in tickets, and then those tickets are synced over to teams that work in Jira, for example, or Trello, right? Then we also see software development use cases where multiple different software development tools sync over to an efficient project management tool like Asana, so that the work that is specific to development work can happen in the tools that are best for those, and then project planning can happen in other tools. So in addition to the tools that we've spoken about, these are some of the other categories that we support. So we support these project management tools, these software development tools, spreadsheet and collaboration tools, and help desk and CRMs. So you'll notice a lot of logos here that might look familiar to you. We can synchronize between these tools. Then we go into how valuable Unito is. So we've noticed that for users that implement Unito, work velocity accelerates and nothing falls through the cracks. Staff are happier working on things that matter and tools that they enjoy. So you don't have to force someone to learn a new tool. They can stick to the tool that they're most efficient in. And agility increases through clarity and alignment in real time. So in the beginning, it showed kind of Slack and Gmail. There's no need to go to other tools to find out information on what's happening. You can see that in the tools that you're working out of, right? And to put that quantitatively, we also have a quick napkin calculation here that explains if you had a team of 6 people on your team with an average of 111 changes performed in any given tool. So that's the copying and pasting, the comments, things like that. And if you multiply that by the average time it takes to manually replicate these changes, and you multiply that by the fully average loaded cost of the members of your team, then you can quickly see how that number increases, right? So you can see that the true cost of wasted time, if you take just these figures, is $679 a month, or almost $8,000 a year. And we just took 6 people in a team. You would multiply that by the number of teams in your business, and that number can quickly escalate. In terms of how Unito's pricing works, there's 2 things to consider. The first is defining a plan, and then the second is defining a plan tier. So when it comes to defining a plan, you need to look at the feature set that's important to your team. So each plan we offer has a different feature set that comes with it. And when we say feature set, we mean how much time does it take for information to sync between these tools? Does it support syncing multiple custom fields? Does it come with an onboarding session and a dedicated customer success manager? So you need to determine whether those things are important to you and which ones are must-haves for your teams. Tools like Google Sheets and Airtable are super customizable, which means you can have many custom fields in those tools. And so those are just things to consider. Then once you consider feature set, you also need to consider the plan tier. So items kept in sync. Our main value metric is items kept in sync. And the way we define that is a work item synced from one tool to another. So if we take Airtable and Google Sheets, for example, a row synced over from Google Sheets to a record in Airtable counts as 2 items that we're keeping in sync. And as long as an item meets the criteria of your flow, so in Leila's case, she had the planning as the trigger for the flow. Once an item no longer meets those criteria, then it drops from the items kept in sync. Okay. Let me go on to the next slide. And that's it. That's our presentation for today. Does anybody have any questions about anything we showed you today, about how Unito works? I'd be happy to field those questions. No questions? Okay. Leila, we either did a great job or that I'd like to think we did a great job. If you have, oh, I see no questions so far. Okay, thank you. So if you have any questions, or if you wanted to book some time with Leila and I after, we dropped some links in the chat that would be useful for you, including my meeting link. If you're already a customer, I'd be more than happy to direct you to Leila as well. We've also included our support email in the chat for any technical questions you have as you go through your evaluation of Unito. So thank you everybody for joining our webinar today, and have a lovely rest of your day then.